This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts in the Wire, episode 113. Advanced Analytics for SEO, recorded at TechSEO Boost 2019. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 113 of Experts on the Wire. What you're about to hear was recorded on December 5th, 2019, live at TechSEO Boost in Boston. I was asked to host this panel on advanced analytics for SEO and also make it an Experts in the Wire podcast episode. There's a little twist, though, in the way that I normally do these podcasts, of course. Normally, I do one-on-one interviews, but this panel had four really amazing guests. There was Asia Frost from Hubspot, Jim Gianoglio from Bounteous, Colleen Harris from CDK Global, and Alexis Sanders from Merkle, who's been on this podcast before. They all had really fabulous things to say about advanced analytics and using that to help improve your SEO, to grow traffic, to diagnose traffic issues, and to communicate analytics things to others within your company or organization. Some of the specific things you're going to learn were how to deal with dark traffic, how to track AMP correctly, a really cool report for dealing with content cannibalization. There's mention of a lot of tools that I'm sure you all are going to want to take notes on and check out. So finally, before we jump in, this was a live panel, so the audio is not the typical studio quality of Experts in the Wire, but the crew there did a really good job capturing this, and I can't wait to share this advanced analytics for SEO panel with you now.
I want to begin by talking about a problem that HubSpot had and direct that to Asia. So you had an issue with content cannibalization, and you used analytics to help solve that problem. Could you talk through that?
Yeah. So like a lot of large companies, we had a lot of different teams creating content. We'd also been creating content for over 11 years. So when I started digging into kind of content cannibalization across all of our pages, I became overwhelmed very quickly. And I was also, using Ahrefs and Search Console and hitting those limits super quickly. Like I knew that I was only scratching the surface because like if you look in Ahrefs, our blog is ranking on page 1 for over 300 queries. And that's just the US blog. And that's just like one subdomain. So as most SEOs know, you can get around a lot of data limits by using Google Data Studio. I found a really cool content cannibalization template from Strategic, which is a marketing agency, and then I built on that. So it basically looks at queries that multiple landing pages are ranking for, and it organizes it by the number of landing pages. So it's prioritized by like how much cannibalization is occurring. And then you can drill down into which specific queries you have those pages for, and see, how many clicks and impressions each have generated, start to figure out which page you should, redirect to or merge. And because you're doing this in Data Studio, you could layer it with custom events or goals in GA. So you could even see like page A might have a lower number of clicks, but it's generating way more conversions. So we should actually prioritize that one.
Has anybody else on the panel dealt with content cannibalization and using data to solve for that issue?
So at CDK, for those who don't know, we are a digital agency for car dealerships. So I manage the analytics for about 7,000 dealerships across the United States and Canada. So there's a large amount of that goes together, and we've actually built a similar type of tool of using the Search Console data and bucketing it by intent to try to understand what type of pages. And then we've spent a lot of time working through canonicalization, not a saint thing, and going from there to really understand what we should be having for the tags and what we shouldn't be having for the tags based off of kind of what's connecting a user intent to the actual page.
What sort of intent categorizations are you using? Can you give some examples?
So specifically, since ours is automotive, we separate first service and parts and then kind of a new car or used car. And from there, it's a very since I work with car dealers all day, we've got to be able to take very technical things and put it in their language. We go off of almost that who, what, when, where, and why of like what part of the shopping process are they in, and bucketing keywords according to that. So is it the beginning, the middle? Are they really doing that hyper-local search and we want to have something show up? But it's really organizing everything based off of the intent of what we're trying to get done and then going backwards.
I see. Is there anything, Alexis, anybody have anything else to add in terms of content cannibalization? Sorry, I thought I saw a little nod. In terms of content, then we're going to move on and talk about traffic analysis, but I also wanted to ask, just in terms of looking at engagement of users on a site, are there any particular analytics, reports, or metrics that you use to measure that? I think we're all past the very common things like bounce rate and stuff that really doesn't tell us much of anything, so I'm wondering if there's any more sophisticated metrics that you use.
We use a lot within 360 for the custom funnels and then the behavior path. Our designers will come up and say, this is the path we expect people to go to, and then we'll build segments off of that, and then look at where people are actually working and where people are actually going and dropping off, and then redo design based off of that. Because we found a lot that there's what you expect a shopper to do and what a dealer expects a shopper to do, but until you start looking at that behavior flow report in GA, or if you've got 360 and you're doing custom funnels, you don't really understand what the customer is actually doing.
Excellent. So, Colleen, I wanted to start with you on traffic analysis. Don't worry, everyone else will get the mic as well. There's a report you were telling us about. It's a specific geography and location report in analytics. I'm wondering if you could tell us about that, especially having to do with this site as well.
Yeah, so when working with customers and our clients, we'll always start within the city report, because when you're trying to do 7,000 sites but have it be like a brick and mortar business, we're a weird bird. Like, it's just hard to figure out. And so the city report is the first place, and all of those demographic reports that live within Google Analytics helps us really quantify for our customer where their shoppers are actually coming from, because we're still trying to translate things into a brick and mortar experience. So that helps a lot, and also becomes that first, I can look at a city report and in 5 seconds tell you entirely what's going wrong with advertising, or what's going on with social that we need to fix, where a UTM tag is going to be broken. So it becomes that one of the first places we start for any sort of, we think something's wrong.
What's an example of an advertising being broken that will show up at a city report?
I have so many of these fun ones. We had a third-party agency that was working with a mini dealership in Florida, but they were getting 20,000 visitors a month, which is, if anyone has ever looked at a mini website, that's like insane. So, but nobody was converting and nobody was doing anything. And I always say, like, 20,000 people not doing anything is not worth it. By being able to use the city report, we were able to prove that their company was padding the numbers through routing things through different servers and going about all of that. And I see that on a weekly basis of people trying to play the game to inflate numbers for their own report. So we always say that GA is where it's the sniff test to understand what your vendors are actually doing.
Yeah. Great. We'll come back to Colleen in a moment. But Jim, I wanted to turn to you and ask about AMP and measuring AMP. What is the current status of today of how you're looking at measuring the challenges of AMP?
Sure, yeah. I mean, you can measure all of the same things in AMP pages that you can in non-AMP pages. It requires a little bit of a difference in implementation, whether you're using Google Tag Manager or GTag or other methods. The thing you have to be concerned about, or be aware of, is the potential for your users' metrics to be inflated. Because if you're not handling it properly, then a human being gets your AMP page, they get one client ID, which is how Google Analytics, it's the value in the cookie that Google uses to track users, right? So when I say client ID, I'm talking about that value. You go to the AMP page, you get one client ID, then you go to a non-AMP page, and potentially you get a new client ID because it's on a different domain. So in that case, that user shows up as two users in your data. You kind of build that out to scale, and you could have significant inflation in your users counts. There are ways to deal with that. The documentation is all very well documented. we used to make fun of Google really badly about their shitty documentation, but they've, oh, sorry, is this a Not Safe for Work podcast? $1 in the bucket. So
It's fine. I can edit.
you could bleep that out, yeah.
You just gave me more work to do.
You need machine learning to automatically translate. No, anyway.
Yeah, they have that now.
So yeah, I mean, their documentation is really good now. So it's all available. You do a Google search, you'll find it. But you can basically do an AMP linker to do session unification. So a human being has a single client ID, regardless of if they're on an AMP page that's hosted on an AMP cache or an AMP page that's hosted on your domain or your non-AMP page. They still have the same client ID. The only other things to be aware of are to make sure that you're not accidentally filtering your AMP traffic out of your Google Analytics view. It's not uncommon to see people put a view filter in place that says only include traffic that's on my domain. Pretty common to make sure you don't get a lot of spam, fake traffic in your data. But if you do that, then you're potentially excluding traffic that's coming from, ampproject.org or other AMP domains. So those are the kind of the big ones.
Anybody else have anything to add for AMP? Anybody tracking AMP issues before we move on to the next analytics? So, Alexis, I wanted to ask you about, so I've asked a few people before this session things they were interested in learning more about or understanding more about with analytics. And one thing that came up over and over again was there's still this problem with dark traffic. And what do you do with that bucket of traffic that sometimes shows up as direct that could be dark? So I'm wondering if you have thoughts around how to deal with that now.
Yeah, definitely. So that's a huge problem because dealing with direct traffic, you have no context as to where it's coming from. So I guess my first suggestion would be to go into the real-time report and try to approach the site from different perspectives and see what's getting pulled in. Other than that, you're really not left with a lot. There are also tools out there that will crawl your site and check to see whether or not tagging is functioning. So that's another possibility as well. I actually reached out to my analytics team about this question as well, and they had mentioned that they can use log files to compare what they're seeing in the logs versus what they're actually seeing within the analytics platform to kind of compare those two.
What sort of tools are they using in that data? Do you know what they're using in that data science team to pull that together?
Yeah, one of the tools I know is Observe Point. I don't know, do you guys use them at Bounteous? Yeah, there's another one.
Also,
Yeah.
if you don't want to pay a lot of money, go with DataTrue. It's like half the
DataTrue.
cost and
Yes.
does everything that Observe Point does. Is anyone from Observe Point here? Hope not. Okay. Anyone from DataTrue? Okay, good.
We love all the tools.
Great. So one last analytics question. Colleen, you also talked a little bit about looking at data for mobile traffic that was under 3 seconds. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that report.
Yes. So within our industry, there's a lot of FUD around like the world is going to end if your site does not load in under 3 seconds. And people complain about all of these things and it gets escalated when in reality, when you start to actually use the browser data and the behavior data around that, you see that people are staying in a reasonable time. Like the world does not end after 3 seconds. Your customers are not bouncing. They are staying on the site. So we've actually pivoted our talk around site speed to leverage all of the browser load information so we can show customers, and we use Data Studio reporting for it. We've built a custom report that says this is the actual experience your customer is having based off of the browser, based off of, the location and things like that. So we stopped looking at at 12 o'clock at night Virginia test in Safari 11 and look at what your customers are actually doing. And it's been really interesting. Because it's automotive and it's weird, we'll end up sometimes, I've had a dealer who had about a quarter of their traffic come from Windows phones. And we would have, Florida, what can I say? We would have never thought that, we would have never realized that, and it's a whole other experience when you're talking about site speed or user experience on that. So we are very much into a push of using your customers' actual data and the browsers they're actually using to understand site speed and to stop with the world is going to end if you can't get it all within 3 seconds.
Anybody here from Florida? I feel bad for Florida today.
Hey, but I'm right.
Do you have a Windows phone, sir?
So I do want to come back to traffic drops and diagnosing that, but I actually want to switch around a little and talk about data and web regulations. There's a lot of new development here that we're all trying to wrap our heads around. So Jim, I know you have some thoughts around ITP 2 and 3, and I'm wondering if you talk about that.
Yeah, I'm curious. How many people are aware of ITP or ETP? Oh, that's scary. So I'm going to be the bearer of bad news and tell you that the world is falling down and the sky is falling, I guess. The world is ending. So ITP is Intelligent Tracking Prevention. It's comes to us from Apple via Safari. And basically what they're doing, and currently it's in ITP 2.2, ITP 2.3 will be rolling out soon. And this has been in place right now as it is for, they announced it back in February of this year. But basically Safari is capping the maximum cookie expiration to 7 days for cookies that are set in the browser using JavaScript, using document.setCookie, right? That's your Google Analytics cookie. That's pretty much any of your analytics cookies, which keep track of your users, right? So if you imagine now someone comes to your website on Safari browser, and then they come back 8 days later, now there are 2 users in your data. And then they come back another 8 days later, now there are 3 users in your data. So your users metric has to be looked at through that lens of, critical thinking, like, is it really this many users, or is it just inflated because people keep losing their cookies, right? This kind of has a lot of other implications. So if you're doing anything with multi-channel funnel analysis or multi-touch attribution, that just becomes a shit show. There I go cussing. That becomes a crap show. Sorry. Because...
And you said losing your cookies, which Alexis was laughing at.
I just thought it was funny. We're losing our cookies. That's true. Going crazy out here.
The silver lining is, and again, to set some context, normally the Google Analytics cookie is a 2-year expiration. So if a user comes to your site and they don't come back for a year, 364 days later, they're still the same user in your data. You know everything they did, a year and 364 days before. You have all of that information about that user and their previous visits leading up to that. But you can still get that 2-year expiration back. You just have to set the cookies on the server side. So you can use the set cookies headers with some server-side script to set the cookies from your server, as opposed to having the JavaScript from Google Analytics, analytics.js or gtag.js set them for you.
I know we're going a little lightning around through the topic, so are there any resources that that you're aware of people can research further into that?
Corey Underwood has a great blog. If you just search for Corey Underwood developer, you'll probably find it. Simo Ahava, any Simo fans out there? Yes, Simo, of course, has multiple articles on this, as well as things that you can do to fix it. He basically has the instructions and the different ways that you can set it server-side, depending on your stack.
Great. So, Asia, I want to ask you again. You recently shifted analytics, right, due to GDPR. Can you tell us why HubSpot made that decision and then what exactly you did there?
Yeah, definitely. And adding one more thing to the resources, I actually first learned about all of that from a Mike King blog post. I don't know if he's still, but it's a really good one, and it is very apocalyptic. So if you want to be scared, then it's a good one. I actually think this is probably, I asked for it because I was having a very nerdy conversation with my friends a few months ago, and we were talking about like our favorite tools, and I said something about never being able to envision my job without GA, and now we no longer use GA, which is just as fun as it sounds. But basically, because we get a lot of international traffic because of GDPR, we had to stop using like soft opt-ins and tracking cookies for people who didn't explicitly accept cookie tracking, which like decimated our traffic in GA because most people will not take action on that banner. So we've been switching everything into HubSpot. HubSpot does not use cooking to track traffic. They use like hit data, and if you don't set a cookie, basically it uses like internal referral source to link sessions together, but you do lose the first original source. So there's obviously lots of issues with the HubSpot data as well. And basically what we're doing is we're just trying to look at way more data sources. So if we notice something in one platform, I'll try to look at, Ahrefs and Search Console and Stat and just try to reinforce it with as many other platforms as possible. And if you see a trend across multiple data sources, then it's probably a real trend, but it's definitely been tricky.
And Alexis or Colleen, are you doing anything to handle GDPR and thinking about dealing with that?
We aren't with that. Ours is more the California based right now because it's US, so it's the same type of fun and excitement of trying to figure out exactly how we're doing the opt-in and the opt-outs and how we're going to do that. The interesting thing is that the law is so new and so not fleshed out at a point that we have prepared as much as we can, but we're still reliant on states figuring out what's going on until something within the US comes together, so we kind of just sit around and wait for the other shoe to drop and be as prepared as possible for it.
Alexis.
Definitely. And we've run into this only a few times. Specifically, one time that we've ran into it was with log files. And I had never thought of this, but apparently your IP address can be considered PII. Typically, that would be more of our UK branch or if we're serving clients internationally. But most of my personal clients are in the US, so that's been the only time I've ran into that.
Before I continue, how are we doing on time, Megan? Oh, is there a time up there? Okay, I didn't know. I'm clearly prepared. Okay, I want to talk about data and sort of managing and collecting and analyzing data. So Jim, you have been using BigQuery. I'm wondering, just real quick for anybody that might not know, just a quick description of BigQuery, but then how are you using that to fit into your SEO workflow?
Yeah, so BigQuery is Google's petabyte scale cloud-hosted data warehouse. You can use standard SQL to query whatever data you have there. If you have Google Analytics 360, you can link your Google Analytics account to BigQuery and have the data automatically exported to BigQuery every day, or you can even choose a stream and insert option, which is within 15 minutes real time. In terms of how it fits into sort of an SEO workflow, generally I would think about it in terms of the reporting and analysis side of things to start off with. So, you can have more than just your Google Analytics data in BigQuery. You could have your CRM data, your CMS data, your Search Console data, your Google Ads data, your whatever data you have data could be all in BigQuery. And if you've kind of thought things through, you should have a way to link those two together with some sort of a join key. So then you can really start doing some really flexible, customizable, complex reporting and integrations there that you just can't do out of the box reports with Google Analytics or even custom reports in Google Analytics. You can get way beyond that. So on the analysis side, you can do some ad hoc querying, just learn SQL, and there are plenty of resources for that. You could answer questions that you just can't answer within the Google Analytics interface. User-based questions where you want to follow a user across more than the past 90 days, which you can't really do in GA. And then on the reporting side, again, you can really start to combine data sets in an interesting way. And then what I've been seeing a shift in the past couple of years with a lot of my clients, and as clients started getting a lot more traffic and get a little bit more sophisticated, is that they're edging away from using Google Analytics as a reporting interface entirely. They're using it as a collection mechanism, but then putting all the data in BigQuery and then plopping down a visualization tool on top of that, whether it's Tableau or Looker or Domo or Data Studio. And so we see a lot of that movement away from using the interface of Google Analytics and using other tools on top of customizable data sets.
And speaking of using other tools, Asia, you've been using, as you said, Google Data Studio to blend data together. Do you have some examples for how you're doing that at Hubspot?
Yeah, definitely. I think data blending in Data Studio is a really great option if you're not, super skilled at SQL or don't have someone on your team who can immediately write those queries for you. I'm not sure how new this feature is, but if you select two charts or reports in Data Studio that are compatible, it'll ask you if you want to blend them. Like, you don't even have to find a join key or do any of the work. It'll just blend them magically. So it's very cool.
It really is amazing.
Yeah. But you can also do things the hard way or the really hard way and, write the SQL query. I think there are tons of use cases for data blending. one like really interesting one that I was thinking of, or maybe obvious one that I was thinking of yesterday after Claudia was talking about how weather trends can really play into e-commerce buying trends, would be to just, sync up weather and traffic and conversions, and you might be able to spot trends that you had never seen before, because they might be like day-long blips. I think you can, do really interesting things, like you can link together app behavior from Firebase with web behavior in GA. You can put, if you have like a bunch of international properties, you can put them all in one chart to see if, anything's happening to every property at once or multiple properties at once. The use cases are pretty endless.
And Alexis, you use, I believe, Power BI. And so for that sort of class of tools, Power BI, Tableau, et cetera, are there any particular use cases or advantages that you prefer with tools of that nature?
Yeah, definitely. And I think we've said it before, there's so many different tools that you can use to solve any problem. Some people in here could probably solve everything with like a killer spreadsheet. But at the same time, we use Power BI for when data sets get really big. So when you want to pull in, and not like big query big, but kind of like that in between having and setting up a database and Excel crashing. I know, right? But we use it for things like if we're taking SEMrush data, if we're taking Screaming Frog data, if we're taking in GSE data, combining them with some sort of key, whether that's like the URL or the keyword itself. Will Reynolds famously uses and combines paid data. He's also used like GetStat data to pull in local billboards. So there's plenty of use cases out there. It's really limitless to what you could do with analytics. It's a lot about getting that raw data, figuring out how to establish the connections within the data in a way that's meaningful and makes sense. And then on top of that, visualizing it in a way that adds a lot of clarity.
Excellent. I do want to touch a little bit on traffic drops. I have in my notes to ask you, Alexis, about variance anomaly detection and forecasting. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. So I think something that we have as a baseline setup when we do analytics implementations on clients is anomaly detection within the analytics platform. So anytime that something goes outside of its normal predicted range, we'll be alerted. The challenge with that, though, at least for SEO, is that let's say something happens on the weekends. And typically, for most of our clients, not many people are hanging out on their websites on the weekends, or less people are. So if something happens on the weekends, the variation may be within the expected range. So it's important to have other checks on top of that. Probably most people here probably have some sort of ranking checker for their top keywords as well. So that, I guess, would be related as well.
Is there anything else particularly interesting that you others are looking at for diagnosing ranking or traffic drops? Or sorry,
we talked about something yesterday that was like super cool.
Yeah. So there's a couple of really cool tools out there that do anomaly detection. So one is Antidote, depending on where you're at, how to pronounce it. The other one is Outlier, outlier.ai. And our company has been talking about working with them in a partnership. We demoed their tool. It's amazing. It does correlative analysis. So it says, you can feed it multiple data sets, and it's going to say, hey, we see normally that your ranking data is here if you're feeding your ranking data, and your session data to your website is here. And on this date, those two things started to diverge. So something weird is happening there. So there's all kinds of cool use cases there. But it really just, it does the automatic checking for anything out of the norm at many different levels for you because you don't have the time every day to do that. So yeah, that's a good tool.
Excellent. So, I'm sorry.
We've actually taken a little different approach. We use the Regexinator, which is quite possibly the best tool on the internet right now if you're not using it, mainly because I'm too tired to write regex by myself. Like, who's got time for that? So we leverage that and then set up the series of alerts within GA based off of that. So we're getting a little more into the complex places of where traffic's falling and things like that. So you're not getting a huge amount, but you can pinpoint the range of things that you need to pay attention to in one expression.
Love it. Lots of tools.
I have a shout out for Victor, who is right there. Victor built a very cool tool for my team that basically looks at falling traffic week over week across like a set of, I don't know, maybe like 500 pages. So basically it'll say if if week one traffic is lower than week one, month one traffic is lower than week one, month two traffic, and then so on for every week of the month, for 3 out of the 4 weeks, then we should go in and look at this tool or look at this page and see like why this page is actually dropped in traffic. So that's been really helpful for us because we have a pretty large set of high traffic pages that we care about. And so being able to isolate like, okay, traffic is down, but it's, specifically down for these pages that have had 15% traffic drop, like we need to look into this.
Awesome. Nice shout out to Victor too. So we've talked about like using tools and dealing with data regulations and traffic analysis, but not at the end of the day, but in a large respect, we need to use data and analytics to report and communicate within our company or organization to actually get things done or make sure that they see the value in the work that SEOs are doing. And so there were a lot of really amazing presentations that I sort of caught bits and pieces of about all this amazing, like very technical analysis, but there is a side of it where we need to communicate this data to people that are not SEOs. And so I'm wondering if, Colleen, if you could first talk a little bit about how do you present and analyze and present that analysis of organic traffic data to show its true value?
Yes, so like I said, we are translating very technical SEO data and all of those things to something a car dealer is going to want to pay attention to. So I would say 95% of the data and the work that we're doing, we're not really ever going to talk about because it's just going to be a data dump and they're not going to care about it. For us, we will bring it down to, and it's a simplified thing, but about 5 KPIs that are going to matter for them, and then hoping they will remember 1 or 2 of those. So we will organize based off of, if you paid attention to nothing else, I want you to remember this one thing. But that's been our biggest success of being able to still remember, I've got to translate this into what means more foot traffic in the store and like how your brand is doing. So we talk a lot about Google My Business and the management we do for that and how that impacts everything. And that's really part of SEO and being able to help them visualize that. But yeah, we will take all of the work and all of the data and maybe 5 metrics and 2 pages tops. And we very much push to get away from dumping on a client, but getting them those couple of things that will matter and translate to what they're seeing in the store.
And some of those metrics are?
For us, it's particular around the KPIs, so that within our industries, there are KPIs that are going to indicate the interest in shopping, and then KPIs that are going to indicate the translation into foot traffic. So we will always start with that, of being able to look at inventory searches, but not only looking at a specific car, but did somebody do something on that page? It doesn't matter if somebody visited a page. You want to know about the customers that did something and took an action on that page. So we've pivoted a lot of our reporting for that to not just talk about how many visits you got in a month, but how many engaged customers did you get? And how long are they staying and when are they coming back? And, are they coming back a couple times in a week? That's always going to be an indication that they're about to pull the trigger and come into the store. And then we also try to track that with advertising for Google Ads and then the in-store visits that you can get within Google Analytics to translate, here's everything we did and here are the people who showed up.
Asia, what is this technical health report that you're using at HubSpot?
Yeah, so this was drawn on or building on the Botify technical SEO dashboard. They have an integration with Data Studio, so that's where I started. That report is really good for high level. It'll talk about like status changes if you have a big spike in 301s or 404s. It looks at like the number of pages crawled. Really good high level metrics, but it doesn't let you drill down into like what's happening on a page level. So to that, then what I've started doing is pretty manual. Like I'll run a report in Screaming Frog and then upload it into Data Studio, and kind of that'll be a good mix of high level and more granular. I've also started playing around with the Lighthouse API. like the user experience report is actually really, really cool. And that integrates with Data Studio as well.
Is that report something you're using, or you're showing that to others at HubSpot?
Yeah, I'm mostly using it. Right now we have like a pretty small team of people who are actually looking at like those technical health metrics. It's probably me and Victor. So I don't know if it would get that much traction around the company.
Great. We're going to do 2 more quick questions for the panel, and then I think save a few minutes for audience questions. Alexis, you have something you call a bad case study. Why use a bad case study?
Okay, so I think this is in conjunction with, of course, building good case studies. So when positive things happen, definitely build case studies about that. But inevitably, because of the field that we're in and because of Murphy's Law, something bad is going to happen. And it's important, I think, to capture that knowledge. Even if you don't necessarily share that with your boss, knowing things is just so important. So for instance, let's say your client or one of your dev team members adds a bunch of canonical tags that made no sense, right? That's horrible. You don't necessarily want to share that out with anyone. But at the same time, when they fix it because you freaked out and like it caused a chain reaction of emails and that ends up fixed, you want to know, all right, well, how quickly did Google turn around and re-index the content, the correct content? And so then when something later happens, you can quantify that risk very accurately.
Did that happen?
Yeah, that did happen to me.
Do you know how long it took?
So it was a very, very subtle mistake. Basically, for 248 pages, they had switched the canonical to an HTTP instead of HTTPS. So we basically saw a fishtailing where our HTTP traffic for those pages came up as those URLs were switched out in the index, and then it flipped back. And it took about 2 days. So
2 days
for our particular
Good to know.
client.
So I know we don't have a slide, but I think each panelist has one takeaway that you want to share. So like, we want to make sure that you leave with, we've shared a lot of stuff. It was like a very sort of lightning round panel, but we want to make sure everyone leaves with sort of one actionable thing. So starting with Jim.
So since this panel is all about analytics and measurement, I would be remiss if I don't tell everybody about the Measure Slack channel or channel team, whatever they call those things. So do a Google search for Measure Slack, and you just have to fill out a Google form, and usually Lee Eisense, I think I'm pronouncing his last name right, will get you added pretty quickly. But that's where all of the cool measurement folks are hanging out these days. And you can get your questions answered by top experts in the world, usually like within a couple of minutes.
Awesome. Asia.
Okay, I'm actually going to piggyback on that and recommend another Slack group. I've been in the Women in Tech SEO Slack group for a month and a half, and it is an amazing community. It's very supportive. We also have an analytics room, but there's way more than just analytics, and yeah, highly recommend joining.
Awesome. Alexis.
I would just remember that analytics, like SEO, is a field that has an immense amount of depth and breadth. There's people who are in analytics who are experts in a particular field, for instance, like statistics or data visualization or connecting systems. There's all sorts of expertise and growth that we can find in analytics, but not to overwhelm yourself, because it's a lot of learning. Try to do what's useful, take it as an iterative process, and just try different things, but go back to what's practical for you.
Great. Colleen.
I would say there's not enough support almost for common sense. You can spend all day with your data scientists and they can build these great tools and they can do all these great things, but you need somebody in there that's just reading it from a person perspective to make sure things are going on. I come from a non-technical background. I managed a grocery store for years and did a bunch of things. So I work with my scientist and my analyst and everything, and I know I bring that perspective. And there's a lot of times that they'll come with us fully convinced about something, and it just doesn't pass a sniff test almost. So there's never enough, I think, credit given for just being able to have someone to read something at a practical level to see if it actually makes sense.
Great. Love it. And with that, we've got 2 minutes, 12 seconds for audience questions. And give a hand for the panel, too, by the way.
Yes, huge hand for the panel.
Awesome.
Who has questions? I see a hand in the back, or it may have been a yawn. Any questions, guys?
Come on, guys. One question.
I see you.
You, sir, you seem like you have a question. No, I'm just kidding.
This question's for Colleen. So you work in the automotive industry. I would imagine attribution is pretty difficult in that industry. How do you get past the fact that a lot of people, instead of submitting a lead online, will just walk onto the dealership and look at a car without submitting any information?
Welcome to the thing that keeps me up at night. We have actually now, I'm going to blank on the name because I'm sitting up here and all these people are looking at me. We partner with a couple of different tools that will allow us to start to track in-store traffic based off of various things and keeps us on the right side of any sort of privacy laws. And if you find me later on Twitter, I'll tell you the exact one, but it has left my brain. So that's where we've started to explore, because the Google Analytics attribution is great for the touch and kind of education there, but you're at the mercy of Google to get in-store visits to trigger for things like that. So we're moving to a world where we can look at attribution in about 5 different reports. Is how we kind of do our sales attribution and match, is that it's not one thing or a direct line. Because of that, people are going to fill out emails. CRMs in the auto industry are full of crap. So it's so hard to really trust that. So instead of trying to say there's one way to do attribution, we look at 5 different ways, including a Facebook matchback and advertising influence on your vehicles and things like that, and approach it that way. Is that here's a suite of tools we can offer you in order to show you the influence your website, your SEO, or your advertising had on your sales.
Wow. Were you watching the clock? That was exactly timed to the second. That was amazing.
We're running like a minute or two early, so if others have questions, we definitely can.
Yeah, we have time for more, apparently. One up front.
Yep, coming up front.
While we're waiting for Eric to get the mic, this kind of reminds me of something in architecture. I've never heard of anyone doing this in our industry, but in architecture, apparently they're setting up these boxes in certain offices to pick up Wi-Fi. So people that carry their mobile in, it clocks whenever it catches onto a Wi-Fi, and then you can tell how many people are actually using the space and how they're engaging with it. So kind of reminded me of what you guys are doing.
That's one of the tools that actually gets used for some of the larger dealerships, and people will do that. So there's a range of things that kind of gather. And if we can't get one piece of personal identifying information, there are other pieces that we use with our tools to help us attribute as best we can.
That's cool. Okay.
Google gave
there's a whole field of in-store analytics, which is all about different methods of, whether it's cameras or whether it's, you go to Target and you connect to their Wi-Fi, they know which aisle you're walking down, how long you're standing in front of a specific product. There's a whole field of this, which is just fascinating, but yeah.
Google gave small business owners low energy Bluetooth beacons. I'm sure if you ask Barry Schwartz, he'll tell you a little bit about this. My question is actually, I haven't had to do this recently, but in previous positions, dealing especially with executives, a lot of times they're asking from an SEO analysis standpoint to come up with a single number that they can track. And I know it's always painful, but I'm wondering and curious how you guys are thinking about it today. Just because if you are merging all these different dispersed data sets together, for instance, like SEMrush data with your GSC data and all those other things, there's certain assumptions that are being made in some of that data or some of the ways that they do collection that is different. So I'm kind of wondering how you guys think about if you were to be prompted to bring things into a single metric or something along those lines, how you would approach that.
Well, if you're e-commerce, it's really easy. Revenue. You just use revenue. Because executives at the end of the day care about money. So it's as close as you can get to money or things that affect that so that they can then make one of the million decisions they probably have to make during a single day. But that number can be really hard to get at, and for SEO, it can be challenging to use because, we're fairly high mid-funnel at the, oftentimes at the end of the funnel, it's kind of hard to say we got them there, but they didn't convert because of X, Y, or Z. That can be really challenging to do. So I would say if you can, use revenue, but if you can't do that, try to get as close as possible to whatever is affecting that, and try to present it in a way that makes sense. They're probably very intelligent people, so they may not understand because of the labeling that we have in our field that a new user is not a person. It's not someone that's out there going around. It's a person that's been in the site from the last 30 days and it's last click, hit the site at organic. And there's all these different things that they'll understand if you tell it to them. I think it's more about contextualizing what the information actually means to make sure that they understand it appropriately.
You don't use linking root domains? I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Anybody else have an answer to that? Using a one metric scenario.
I guess I would just fight back tooth and nail. If I had enough leverage, I would just not give it to them. I'm being kind of cheeky about it, but yeah, I would try to explain that that's just not a good way to go about it. It's, when you're aggregating everything into a single number, you're just hiding all of the actual information that's in there. So
I think, an issue with that too is that you have branded and non-branded organic search. So do they care about people that don't know about them more than branded search? And that's one issue of that metric.
Yeah, I guess
That's
you
all I
can
have
kind
to
of
say.
try to story tell and say you're just getting one part of the picture. It's like trying to hire someone just based on their GPA. There's so many more things that make up a person. There's so many more things that make up an organic search program.
Great. Any other, are we taking more questions?
We could probably do one more.
One
Anyone
more.
Has any final questions?
What common key or metrics would you look at when you're trying to marry data between a website and an app? Specifically, if possible, e-commerce. So an example being you put a button up at the top of the page on mobile that says download our app, and now organic search traffic stops converting. GA.
yeah, there's a number of different ways you can go about it, but at the end of the day, you have to be able to either know who that person is in your back-end system. Like if they're logged into your website and then they download the app and they log in, you know who they are, so you have a join key there. If you don't have that, if you're not Amazon and people just aren't constantly signed into your site, which is most non-Amazon sites, then you have to figure out some workarounds, right? So like you have a button in your website that says download our app. So when they click on that, you can pass that information along. You could basically pass their client ID along to be picked up on the app side, store that as custom dimension, and do it that way.
Great. Anyone else? No, we're good? Okay. Give another hand for the panel. Awesome.
Thank
awesome
you
stuff.
guys.